Have you ever caught yourself wondering if everything you've been told about women's anatomy is actually true? Maybe in hushed conversations among friends, maybe scrolling late at night through forums or videos, you've stumbled across words like clitoris, vagina, or the ever-mysterious G-spot and felt that quiet uncertainty rise inside you. You wanted to ask, but didn't know how. You wanted clarity, but what you got was half-truths, jokes, or myths. And in those moments, a quiet question lingers. What is really down there, and why does it matter so much for intimacy, connection, and trust? I'm Dr. Maya Kapoor, a board-certified urologist and pelvic surgeon. And today, I want to take you on a journey into one of the most misunderstood landscapes of the human body, the female sexual anatomy. We'll walk through it together, without shame, without judgment, guided only by science and compassion. By the end, the G-spot will make anatomical sense, clear, practical, respectful. To really understand female anatomy, we need to rewind to the very beginning, before birth, before gender expression, back to the early stages of life in the womb. In those first fragile weeks of pregnancy, every fetus begins the same way. There are no obvious genitals, no clear sign of male or female. Just two tiny starting points, a genital tubercle and a urogenital sinus. Around the 10th week, those tissues start responding to genetics. If chromosomes are XX, they begin to form female structures. If XY, they shift into male anatomy. And here lies one of the most fascinating truths about our bodies. Many of the structures in men and women are homologous. That means they come from the exact same embryonic tissues, simply sculpted differently by hormones. The head of the penis in men and the head of the clitoris in women, they are biological siblings. The foreskin in men and the clitoral hood in women, two versions of the same fold of skin. Even the scrotum in men and the outer lips, the labia majora, in women trace back to the same origin. This shared history explains why certain areas, like the clitoris, are packed with sensitivity. They were built with the same nerves, the same blood vessels, the same raw material as the penis. Now, let's step outside the theory and actually look at the vulva, the part of female anatomy you can see from the outside. The vulva isn't just one thing, it's the whole gateway, the outer lips, the inner lips, the clitoral hood, and that small but powerful button of tissue at the top, the clitoris itself. For most women, the clitoris is not just important, it's the primary source of sexual pleasure. With arousal, the clitoral glands and internal arms engorge and become highly sensitive. The hood protects and glides. Take the clitoris, for example. The clitoris is vast, extending far beyond what's visible, homologous to the penis, full of nerves. Just below the clitoris is the urethral opening, the small passage where urine exits the body. Beneath that lies the vaginal opening, a muscular and incredibly adaptive structure. The vagina is not a passive tube, but a living, responsive organ. During arousal, it lengthens by as much as 3 inches, making space for intimacy. During childbirth, it can expand far beyond what seems possible and still recover with remarkable resilience. There are 3 external openings in order: urethra, vagina, then anus. And now we arrive at the most whispered about landmark of them all, the G-spot. The name comes from Dr. Ernst Greffenberg, who first described it in the 1940s. He spoke of a sensitive patch on the front wall of the vagina, just an inch or 2 inside, that seemed to awaken powerful responses in some women. People described it as a small ridge, an area that responded best to a gentle come-here motion with the fingers. It sounded almost like a hidden button, but science, as always, adds nuance. When researchers searched for a single anatomical structure called the G-spot, they didn't find one. What they found instead was an overlap. That area of the vaginal wall lies directly against the internal branches of the clitoris, along with tiny glands known as Skene's glands. And those glands, fascinatingly, are the female counterpart to the male prostate. So when this zone is stimulated, some women experience heightened pleasure, sometimes even ejaculation. For others, it's less significant, and that's just as valid. The so-called G-spot is part of the clitoral urethral network. Responses vary, and that's normal. Decades of research agree on this. For most women, clitoral stimulation, whether external, internal, or both, is essential for orgasm. And that is normal, that is healthy, that is the reality of female pleasure. So, when we talk about the G-spot, we aren't talking about a myth. We're talking about a complex, overlapping region that exists, but works differently for every woman. Some find it transformative, others hardly notice it, and both are perfectly natural. Because female sexuality is not one size fits all. It is diverse, personal, and beautifully valid. And here's the most important takeaway. Understanding this anatomy is not about maps or labels. It's about empathy. It's about knowing that pleasure for women isn't about chasing a single spot or performance. It's about connection, exploration, and respect. The clitoris is vast. The vagina is adaptive. The G-spot is real but variable. And together, they remind us that female pleasure is as complex and alive as the women themselves. When I sit with patients, whether it's young women struggling with shame or men in long marriages who feel lost, I often see the same quiet shadow in their eyes. It comes from confusion. Years of myths, years of silence, years of treating female pleasure as something mysterious, hidden, even shameful. Shame reduces communication and pleasure. When you don't understand anatomy, when you don't talk about it, when you think pleasure is something to be whispered about or dismissed, you don't just lose knowledge, you lose connection with your partner, with yourself, with the very joy that makes intimacy worth having. That's why clarity matters so much. It's not about being technical. It's about giving people the language and the confidence to explore their bodies with curiosity instead of fear. Take the clitoris, for example. Decades ago, textbooks barely mentioned it. Some medical illustrations left it out completely, as if acknowledging it was somehow improper. In reality, the clitoris has dense sensory receptors dedicated to pleasure. That's not an accident of biology. That's nature telling us that female pleasure is not a side note. It is central, essential, deserving of attention. And when partners don't know this, or when women themselves grow up believing they should climax only through penetration, frustration sets in. They wonder what's wrong with them, when in fact, nothing is wrong at all. Their bodies are simply wired differently, and beautifully so. The vagina, too, is so often misunderstood. It's not a passive tunnel. It's a muscular, responsive, adaptive organ that shifts with arousal, expanding and lubricating to welcome closeness. It strengthens with pelvic floor exercise, recovers after childbirth, and can carry a human being into the world while still being capable of pleasure afterward. That resilience deserves awe, not silence. And then, of course, there is the G-spot, the spark of so many debates. Many couples relax once they learn the front wall region reflects the interplay of clitoral arms, Skene's glands, and vaginal tissue, and start listening to the body's cues. Science has confirmed this variability again and again. Some women report fluid release, female ejaculation, when this area is stimulated. Others do not. Some climax deeply from internal touch. Others require direct clitoral stimulation every time. And when partners learn to honor that diversity, intimacy stops being about performance and becomes about presence. Here's another myth worth breaking: the idea that women are somehow complicated or mysterious compared to men. In truth, both male and female bodies are intricate. Both have their sensitivities, their vulnerabilities, their unique rhythms. The difference is that men have been taught about theirs more openly, while women's have been hidden in silence. That silence creates misunderstanding. It fuels jokes that reduce women to punchlines. It leads men to think bigger is always better, or women to believe they are broken if they don't climax a certain way. But once the silence is broken, once we speak clearly about embryology, about nerves, about blood flow, about the full structure of the clitoris, the mystery dissolves. What remains is not complication, but beauty. One older couple improved simply by shifting attention to the internal clitoral network that surrounds the vaginal canal. And for women themselves, learning about their anatomy is often like reclaiming a stolen inheritance. I've had patients weep in my office when they realize there was nothing wrong with them all along, that their bodies weren't defective, but simply misunderstood. That's the healing power of truth. So let's take a moment to gather what we've learned so far. The clitoris is vast, extending far beyond what's visible. It is homologous to the penis, richly supplied with blood and nerves. The vagina is muscular, adaptive, built to expand and recover. The urethra, small as it is, sits just beneath the clitoris, a reminder that form and function intertwine in complex ways. And the G-spot? Real, yes, but not a single button. A region, part of a larger system, capable of pleasure for some, quiet for others, and always valid either way. Understanding this does more than clear up myths. It opens doors. It invites curiosity instead of shame, connection instead of performance pressure. It tells women, you are not broken. It tells men, you are not failing. And it tells all of us that sexuality is not a mystery to be feared, but a reality to be embraced. If there is one lesson I hope you carry from all of this, it's that knowledge is not about clinical charts or academic debates. It's about freedom. Freedom from shame, from insecurity, from myths that divide couples and isolate individuals in silence. When you know the truth about the female body, you don't just gain facts. You gain the ability to approach intimacy with curiosity instead of fear, with patience instead of pressure, and with reverence instead of doubt. That shift can transform not just private moments, but entire relationships. Think of Harold, who came to me after decades of marriage, certain that he and his wife had simply aged out of intimacy. He described their evenings as quiet, distant, polite. He said, "Doctor, we love each other, but it feels like the spark is gone." When I explained the deeper structure of the clitoris, how it responds, how the internal branches swell and hug the vaginal canal, something softened in him. He realized he hadn't been neglecting his wife. He had been neglecting his understanding. That night, instead of trying to perform, he simply asked his wife what felt good. She cried, not from frustration, but from the relief of being asked. Within weeks, he returned to my office, smiling shyly like a newlywed. "It wasn't gone," he said. "We just needed to find our way back." Knowledge opened that door. Or consider Alan, a young medical student I once mentored. He admitted he felt embarrassed even discussing female anatomy with patients, afraid he'd stumble or say the wrong thing. But when he finally studied the science, not just in textbooks, but through open conversation with women, he realized something profound. The human body is not embarrassing. It is miraculous. And when he began practicing medicine with that mindset, his patients trusted him more. They felt seen, heard, respected. That is the ripple effect of understanding, the way it restores not only intimacy, but also dignity in everyday interactions. So let's return one last time to the G-spot, that infamous term that has been both celebrated and ridiculed for decades. What is it really? The most honest answer is this. It is a region where multiple systems overlap. The internal clitoral arms, Skene's glands, the front vaginal wall. For some, it produces profound pleasure. For others, it's quiet. Both experiences are normal. To reduce female pleasure to the search for a single spot is to miss the bigger truth that the body is not a button to press, but a landscape to explore. Pleasure is not uniform. It is personal, contextual, emotional, and deeply unique to each individual. And here's the beauty. That uniqueness is not a problem to solve. It is the very thing that makes intimacy meaningful. If everybody responded the same way, connection would become mechanical. Instead, variability forces us to listen, to communicate, to slow down. It teaches us that intimacy is not about performance, but about presence. That's why, when partners learn to honor differences instead of resenting them, relationships flourish. That doesn't make them difficult, it makes them human. It means their bodies are designed differently, but just as beautifully, just as powerfully as men's. Once you know that, the frustration fades. You stop asking, "What's wrong?" and start asking, "What feels good?" And that is the question that changes everything. I want to pause here and speak directly to anyone who has ever felt inadequate because of these myths. To the woman who thought she was broken because penetration alone didn't bring her climax. To the man who thought he had failed because he couldn't find the G-spot. To the couples who grew apart because neither had the right map. Hear me clearly. You are not broken. You are not failing. You were simply never taught the truth. And once you learn, you can begin again with more compassion, more patience, more honesty than before. The clitoris is not small, it is vast, branching internally like roots beneath the surface. The vagina is not fragile, it is adaptive, resilient, and alive with sensation when given respect. The urethra and Skene's glands are not irrelevant. They are part of a complex homologous system tied to pleasure and, in some cases, even ejaculation. And the G-spot? It is real, but not in the way magazines promised. It is part of a network, a region of possibility, not a single magic switch. Understanding these truths allows intimacy to stop being a test and start being a journey. It allows women to claim their pleasure without apology, and men to approach with curiosity instead of pressure. It allows partners of all genders in all relationships to replace myths with connection, shame with compassion, silence with conversation. And in that shift, intimacy becomes not just about climax, but about closeness, not just about performance, but about presence. The human body isn't a puzzle. Approach it with curiosity, patience, and respect. And in that patience, that listening, that willingness to honor complexity, intimacy finds its true power. So, whether you are a woman learning to trust your own body again, or a man hoping to be a better partner, know this: understanding is the first step, compassion is the second, and curiosity is the bridge that brings them together. Pleasure is real, the G-spot is real, but what matters most is not the label. What matters is the connection it allows you to feel with yourself, with your partner, with the miracle of being alive in a body still capable of joy. I'm Dr. Maya Kapoor, and I hope today's journey gave you more than just information. I hope it gave you permission. Permission to ask questions, permission to explore, permission to feel without shame. Because female pleasure is not a mystery, it is a birthright. And when we honor it, we don't just improve intimacy, we improve life itself. Thank you for staying with me. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who deserves to know the truth. Subscribe so you never miss more conversations like this. And most of all, take care of your body because you are worth it.